thank you for joining us for challenge number 4. Where has that time go? Eh? Time flies when we're having fun, Ellie, doesn't it? Ellie and I would just like to say thank you so much for all your lovely pictures and your models of lungs. We had some lovely videos and some photos, and we got a stop motion film as well, didn't we, Ellie? Yeah, we really enjoyed watching that. So thank you so much. Keep them coming. So challenge number 4, Ellie, go and tell them what it's all about. You can't, can you? It's about diabetes and seizures. Now, diabetes is an illness, and seizures, well, they can be caused by an illness such as epilepsy, but people can also have seizures for different reasons as well. I know. Well, Ellie says, why are we covering these 2 topics? Well, some of you have messaged us to say that you've got the illness called diabetes or epilepsy, and you would like us, Ellie and I, maybe Lulu, to be able to share what that illness actually means for you and what is it you need to do, or what is it we need to do, Ellie, if something happens to you, so we know we can help them. Okay, Ellie? Right, diabetes then, we'll start off with that. Diabetes is a long-term condition, Ellie, where the body can't produce enough insulin. And insulin is what regulates our blood sugar levels, okay? Now, diabetes is a medical emergency and it can be very serious. And what number do we call then? 999. Well, let's talk about insulin then. What does insulin do? So insulin is what regulates our blood sugar level, and it's a chemical that's produced in our pancreas, which is an organ that hides just behind the stomach. And that regulates our sugar levels to be within our safe zone. Because when someone has diabetes, Ellie, they cannot keep their sugar level in that normal range. It either goes too high or too low. Now, there are 2 types of diabetic people, Ellie. Do you know what they are? Well done. Ellie says there's type 1 and there's type 2. Now, type 1 diabetics are called insulin dependent, and that means they need to inject insulin very regularly throughout the day. And type 2 are non-insulin dependent, but they might have to take tablets, and they still might need to test their blood sugar levels throughout the day to make sure it is in that normal range. And he says, how do you know they're diabetic? Well, sometimes your friends might have told you, or your family members, they would have told you they're diabetic. Or if you don't know them, they might be carrying something on them, such as a card in their purse or the wallet or the school bag. They might have those necklaces we talked about, or bracelets. Or if they have a smartphone, they might have it written on their medical ID. But you can also look for clues in pockets, because sometimes, Ellie, they carry medication around with them, a little insulin pen that looks like this. Or they might carry tablets, or they might have something on them like glucose gel or jelly babies, which they can take when they haven't got enough sugar in their body. Well, let's talk about those 2 different types of attacks, Ellie. When someone has hyperglycemic and hypoglycemic attack. So if their sugar levels go too high, that normally means they haven't taken the correct dose of medication. Or, Ellie, they might have eaten too much sugary foods. Maybe it's their birthday, they've had too much cake. You have too much cake sometimes. Or sometimes they might be unwell due to some sort of infection. Okay, so if their sugar levels go too high, Ellie, what do we need to look out for? Yeah, so they might have a very fruity smell on their breath, Ellie. Or they might be very thirsty. And they might be very warm and dry to touch as well. And sometimes they can be very drowsy. And then they might start to become unresponsive, very confused and maybe drunk-like. And sometimes, if this is not left untreated, they can go into what we call a diabetic coma. So if we see someone that is acting differently, ask them if they're diabetic, and ask them if they've got any medication they can take. And if they're not responding, Ellie, do you know what we're going to do? Ellie knows. We're going to call 999, because this is someone that is going into a diabetic emergency and they need urgent treatment. So that's too much sugar level. Ellie says, well, how do we know they definitely have too much sugar levels? Well, we can't test them, Ellie. Only they can. So we can ask them to test themselves, and they will test themselves by doing that little pinprick test using this testing kit. And you'll see people who are diabetic doing that quite frequently, Ellie. They might do that before and after eating, and maybe before and after exercise as well. And what they do, they get a little tester kit and they do a little pinprick, normally on their finger, and that gives them a little bit of blood, and they put it on their tester kit and it will give them a reading. Now our normal range, Ellie, is between 4 and 7. And if it's higher than 7, then that's when they're called hyperglycemic. And that's when they need to maybe take their medication. And they might inject themselves with insulin, or they might take a tablet. It does depend on the type of diabetes they have. Okay, so you can always encourage them to test them, but you can't test them. You must encourage them to do it. And if they're not going to do it, what number are we calling? 999. Yes, because it is a diabetic emergency. So that's hyperglycemic. What's the other one called? When it's low blood sugar levels. Can you remember? Ellie says it's got an O in it, so that's hypoglycemia. Hypo. Remember hypothermia we did in challenge 1 means low temperature? Well, hypoglycemia means their sugar levels are too low. And someone with diabetes might be able to recognise when their blood sugar levels go too low, because they might get a bit irritable. You sometimes get irritable when you're not eating enough. But it's worse when someone has got diabetes. They become very irrational maybe, and very confused, and they might be sweating, and their skin might be very cold and clammy to touch. They might be trembling lots or shaking, and their levels of response will deteriorate. So they might be talking to you fine 1 second, and then it deteriorates over a period of time, which can be very quick. And again, this is a medical emergency. And if you know someone's diabetic and this is a medical emergency, and you can start giving them some of their sugary things they might have on them, such as a glucose gel that they can just squirt in their mouth, or you might offer them some jelly babies, maybe 3 or 4, and that will hopefully bring their sugar levels up. What else can you give them, Ellie? Yeah, well done. She said you can give them some Coke, but make sure it's full fat Coke. Don't give them any diet, because there's no sugar in that. So something that's very sugary. So maybe honey, maybe a couple of teaspoons of sugar, or maybe apple juice, maybe a glass of apple juice, something with lots of sugar in there, and hopefully that will start improving, and you'll see an improvement of their response, and they'll be coming back round to, their normal self. You can also encourage them to test themselves to see what their blood sugar levels are like. Remember, you can't test them, Ellie. You can't do it, but you can ask them to do it. Remember that little tester kit that gives a pinprick and it gives a little blood reading. Now, if it's working, that's great. You can maybe give them something like a bit of bread or toast or banana, because that can also sustain their blood sugar levels. But what do we do, Ellie, if it doesn't work? Go on, what do we do? Yeah, we call 999. Now, Ellie just said to me, she's seen some people that have this really new kind of testing kit. You are right, Ellie. So some people still do the pinprick on the fingers to give a little blood reading. And they might do that 6, 7, 8 times a day. Don't worry, they know what they're doing when they're doing that. And then if their sugar levels are too high, remember they need to inject insulin. So they have a pen that they just inject insulin, normally into their belly, don't they, Ellie? Sometimes into their leg, but it's normally their belly, and it's different bits of their belly. And sometimes, Ellie, yeah, I know, sometimes they have, Ellie was saying, they might have a pump that feeds insulin into them regularly. So they might have that. But also, Ellie was saying, the tester kit they might have, it's like a 10p they might have on the outer arm or inner arm. It's like an implant that kind of goes a little bit on the body, but just sits on the outside of the body. And they might have this Bluetooth device, Ellie, that they just hold up against that little coin-shaped thing. That gives them a reading, and that saves them doing a pinprick test regularly. But they might need to change this maybe once a week, every 2 weeks. But it just saves them being able to do a pinprick test lots of times a day. Okay? So you might see some people with that, and you can help them do their blood reading by just holding their Bluetooth device against that. But most people just have their pinprick test on their fingers, Ellie, okay? So shall we recap there? So what happens, Ellie, when our blood sugar levels go too high? What's that called? Yeah, I hope you're shouting out as well. Yeah, hyperglycemic. And what do we do then, Ellie? Go and shout out 999. We can encourage them to take their insulin if need be. Now, what happens if their blood sugar levels go too low? What's that called? Yeah, I hope you're shouting out It's got an O in it. Hypoglycemic. And then we need to encourage them to take sugars. Now, Ellie, it's very important we don't try and give sugar to people that are drowsy and that can't swallow, because then, Ellie, they're going to choke, and we don't want to be able to deal with that. So we can only give people sugary things when they are conscious and when they're able to swallow, Ellie. It's very important. And what sugary things can we give them? Go and shout some out. Hopefully they're shouting them out. Yeah, we can give them Coke, not diet though. We can give them some jelly babies, some sugary, honey. And if it's working, because we can tell them to test themselves, and if it's working, we can give them things like some toast or a banana, which will help sustain that sugar levels. But Ellie, if it doesn't work, what do we need to do? 999. Well done. Ellie's just said, okay, Ellie, I'll tell them. Ellie's asking me, why do their sugar levels vary so much? Well, Ellie, remember we said they can't produce insulin. If they're diabetic, that pancreas, that body organ that hides just behind our stomach, it can't it can't produce insulin, and therefore they can't regulate their sugar levels. So if they eat something sugary, let's say they have a bit of cake, and they go running around doing lots of exercise, like you've been running around like a lunatic with Lulu earlier, then their sugar gets burnt off slowly. And then that will start making them go hypo. So they need to eat something sugary, which will make their sugar levels go high again. But if it goes too high and they have too much cake, Ellie, they will go into hyperglycemic, which means they need to inject insulin. So they have to keep balancing their sugar levels out. And it is a balancing act, Ellie, they do every day, all the time. Okay? So that's diabetes. We're going to talk about seizures now. Yeah, now seizures. I know you're going to tell me, aren't you? Ellie says she knows what causes a seizure. Well, yes, we did this in challenge 1, I think. So seizures are caused by lots of different things. But in challenge 1, we talked about what happens when you guys get too hot, we have a feeble convulsion. But seizures can be caused by lots of other things as well, Ellie. So sometimes if you hit your head, you can start having a seizure. Or maybe if you're diabetic in a hypo, you can also have a seizure as well then. Okay? Hypo means what? Low blood sugar levels. But also there's an illness called epilepsy. And epilepsy can cause people to have a seizure. Now, epilepsy is a long-term medical condition again. There is no cure, but there's lots of different treatments that can help prevent the amount of seizures someone has. Now, if someone is having a seizure, we're going to remain brave little soldiers again, aren't we? And we're going to try and stay as calm as possible. Because when they have a seizure, well, it's very sudden and quite dramatic. Now, the seizures we're going to talk about are called tonic-clonic seizures. Sometimes you might have heard them called, grand mal seizures. But you might have also heard them called a fit or convulsion. Now, having one of these seizures, the person goes really stiff and they just lose consciousness, Ellie, and they fall to the floor. But remember, we're going to stay calm and we're going to be brave. Because then what happens is the body will then start to jerk and convulse, and they might go blue around the mouth. There might be lots of fluid appearing in the mouth, from whether it's vomit or blood from maybe where they've bitten their tongue. The breathing might also be very irregular, and sometimes, Ellie, they can lose control of their bowels and also their bladder. But we're going to be brave and we're going to try and help them. Okay? Now, please be rest assured, the person having that seizure, they will normally be fine. They might have hurt themselves though, Ellie. If you fell to the floor, you might have hurt yourself. We might have to help them with those injuries a bit later on. So signs and symptoms to look out for then. If someone's having a seizure, like grand mal or that fit, same thing, they're going to lose consciousness. Their body will go very rigid, very stiff. They might have a very noisy difficulty breathing, and they can start to jerk. The whole body, or maybe just isolated movements, will happen. And there'll be lots of fluid appearing in their mouth, Ellie. And what we're going to be doing, we'll shout out, we're going to be brave. We're going to be brave little soldiers. Okay, and we're going to just try and stay calm. Even if people around are panicking, we're going to try and keep them calm as well. Now, if it's one of our friends, we would know what to do anyway, wouldn't we? Because we would have been with our friends when they're having those seizures before. But it might be someone we come across on our street or on our daily exercise. And there might not be anyone around to help them, so we're going to try and help them. Ellie says, what are we going to do? Well, first of all, we're going to stay calm. And it's important, Ellie, to make sure they're safe, because in having a seizure, they can keep banging their head up and down on the floor. So what are we going to do then? Yeah, we're going to try and put a cushion underneath there. And we're going to make sure everyone else stands back. And we're going to move anything dangerous out of the way, especially if there's tables and chairs, or if there's any hot drinks. We don't want any hot drinks or sharp objects landing on them or hurting them, okay? But it's very important, Ellie, we do not restrain them. So what do we not do? Shout out. We do not restrain them. We just make sure they're safe and protecting the head. So what can we use if we can't find a cushion? Because maybe we're outside on the street. Yes, Ellie says we can use a jacket or a bag, something rolled up we can put underneath their head so it doesn't keep banging up and down the floor. But please do not hold their head, Ellie. Don't hold it, don't restrain them. Now that seizure is going to last a long time, so it's really important, Ellie. We've got to get a watch out, and I'll get you to time it. Because sometimes 20 seconds can feel like 20 minutes when you're watching it, Ellie. So we're going to make sure we time it. And then when they finish the actual seizure, what will happen, they'll go through a recovery stage where they might come around, or they might not. They might just relax the whole body. So rather than being all stiff and jerky, Ellie, they'll just relax. And that's when we need to check their breathing. Remember our danger response, open the airway, check the breathing. Do you remember Dr. AB? Do you remember the primary survey? Dr. AB. And then we then put them in a recovery position, don't we, Ellie? Yeah, and do you remember we did that in one of the Star Awards earlier? Now, Ellie, do you know when we need to call the ambulance? So we need to make sure we call the ambulance if the seizure lasts for longer than 5 minutes. If we can't wake them up, Ellie, after how many? 10 minutes. And if they've injured themselves, or if they come out of it, Ellie, and then they start having another seizure, we then must make sure we call the ambulance. And also, we always call the ambulance, Ellie, if we don't know what to do. Okay? So let's just recap that, shall we, Ellie? So someone that has a seizure can be caused by lots of different things like head injuries, but also it could be caused if someone's too hot, especially you children, when you get too hot, it can cause you to have a seizure. And also illnesses such as epilepsy and diabetes can cause people to have a seizure. Now, what are we going to do if someone just suddenly starts having a seizure? What are we going to do? We're going to be brave. Yes, we are. We're going to be very brave, because it's not very nice thing sometimes to watch, because the whole body can just drop to the floor and jerk uncontrollably. And there's lots of fluid appearing in their mouth, and they might have lost control of their bowels. So we're going to stay calm and be brave and help them. And what we're going to do to help them, can you remember? Yeah, we're going to make sure they're safe. So we're going to put something around their head to make sure they don't hurt themselves, and move anything out or anyone else around that's going to be dangerous to them. And then when they've stopped their seizure, because, we forgot, didn't we? We've got to time that seizure. It's very important to time it, because we must call the ambulance if that seizure lasts for longer than 5 minutes. If they're unconscious for how long? Go and shout out. Can you remember? 10 minutes. Yeah, if they're unconscious for more than 10 minutes. And also, if that person has another one straight away, and of course we're always going to call if we don't know what to do. So today, Ellie, lots to talk about. We've covered diabetes and seizures. So let's give them their challenge, then, Ellie. What's their challenge going to be? So challenge number 4 for you guys. We want you to be able to produce an emergency contact sheet that can be kept on the outside of the fridge, or maybe in the fridge, because normally when the ambulance comes to your house, they normally look inside the fridge for medication. So it's always good to have an emergency contact sheet somewhere in the house so you guys know who to call in an emergency. So it could have lots of useful things on there, such as a vet, if something happened to your pets, and the local doctor's surgery, any medication that anyone in the house might be on, maybe grandparents, neighbours' numbers, or who to call in the emergency. Okay, there's some examples on the challenge 4 sheet, so make sure you answer those questions and make sure you have a go at challenge number 4. And then we will look forward to seeing you, won't we, Ellie, for challenge number 5 very soon. You take care, guys. Keep safe and keep well. Bye. Say bye, Ellie. Bye.